going to be your last chance to get a question in the queue, and we'll try and get an answer before the end of the webinar. Our first question, what about B2B negotiations, such as between a lender and a debt settlement company? Both are skilled agents trying to find a sweet spot to meet. What is the best way to go about negotiating with a seasoned agent on the other line? Does anyone want to tackle that one?
I mean, I'll try that one. Only because in one of my previous lives, I managed a department that was solely relative to working with debt settlement companies. And one thing that we did is, you know, at the end of the day, it's about being honest, right? I mean, we're humans. It's a conversation. And your debt settlement companies that you're negotiating with and your clients, we all know what's going on, right? We all know the purpose of the debt settlement company, the agreement that they have with the consumer, and then, of course, the debt that is owed to your client, hence that we're trying to collect on. And so what worked when I ran this department was, hey, you know, send me the power of attorney, you're negotiating on behalf of this consumer, I'm negotiating on behalf of my client. These are the guidelines. And, you know, a lot of times what worked best for us was getting that financial summary to support what is the amount that they're looking to settle, what is the actual financial summary of the consumer, and then if it was something way below the authority that we had to work with a debt settlement company with our client, going to our client and having the conversation about what they wanted to do. And sometimes there were no deals. I mean, there would be months where we'd still negotiate the same consumer for 3 or 4 months in a row, and it would take maybe month 5 before an agreement was finally met. And so I think patience is key with that as well. But at the end of the day, it's more about being honest and just saying, look, these are the guidelines, this is what we have to work with, and we can meet, or we're just going to have to continue negotiating as time continues to go on and the account continues to age. So that's my answer. I don't know if Roger, Kelly, you have something better than that, but that's what worked when I dealt with that type of portfolio.
I think I totally agree. I think what it all goes back to is just having a conversation and building a relationship with that consumer and to really get to the bottom of what the issue is. But I mean, I think you nailed it.
Thanks.
I also find that when you're talking to, like you said, the seasoned agent, remember the seasoned agent on the other end of that phone is used to talking to seasoned collectors. And a lot of times seasoned collectors come at their throat. Very blunt, very brutal, with a very I have to talk to you tone of voice. So I'm going to apply the term or the phrase flattery will get you everywhere. And if you compliment them a couple times, you know, maybe say, well, I tell you what, it's refreshing talking to you. Not everyone I talk to is as reasonable as you are. And you build up their ego a little bit, they may be more inclined to meet you slightly on your side of the tug of war rope.
I love that one.
Great answer, Roger. We got a few questions.
One of those a year.
We got a few questions in on different types of debt. Negotiating, for example, and collecting unsecured debt. Oftentimes the customer is paying a secured debt and putting unsecured debt on the back burner. We had a question about tools that can be used when negotiating on large balance student loans, and a question about negotiating on high balance subprime auto loans. So maybe we could try and wrap those up in a, you know, sort of how do you approach different types of debt, or the balance of how the balance of the debt impacts your negotiating strategy.
I can take that
Sure.
piece. So we can never go in and assume that someone can't afford to pay it, because the balance might look high to us does not mean that it's high to them. So I always use the example, if you go into Target, and you can't go into Target without spending at least $75, and if you can, please let me know how you do that. But let's just say you're in line and she's like, all right, your bill is $75. Would you like to break that up into monthly payments maybe? Like, I would probably be offended that she's assuming that I can't pay. So if we're assuming people can't pay because they're high balances, we're making pretty strong assumptions on who they are as people, and that's almost offensive. So looking at every account as if you know what, this is probably something they could pay at one time. It's probably not hugely out of the reach of possibility for them to pay it now. Let's figure out maybe why they're where they are today. So maybe asking those questions of saying, okay, so this is a pretty high balance. Just wondering what has happened that's caused you to get into this situation, and how can we get this taken care of, and how can we work with you today to find a solution. But never assume they can't pay, because that's going to be the worst thing. That's going to make you sound like you're not confident in their ability, and they're going to jump right on top of that. They're going to be like, oh, well, I think I'm going to be able to walk all over this collector. They're a little uncomfortable with the balance, and maybe I'm not. I mean, how many of you have ever gotten $100,000 payoffs, like paid in full, and you're like, holy cow, all I did was ask and I got it? So just assume they can pay. That's your first step.
I would say confidently assume they can pay.
Yes.
And Kelly, I think you're absolutely right with that. The other thing I would say is, let's first review the average consumer and remind ourselves that 10, 12, 13, 15 collectors and creditors are sending letters and calling them. So it doesn't sometimes matter if it's secured, unsecured, small balance, or high balance. It's the manner in which you approach the person and how you talk to the person. Remember, several of the collectors are going to be condescending to them, or they're going to be disinterested and they just want the money. One of my favorite techniques, and I choose to use the word technique over tactic because I think it's a little softer in this age and day, but would be on a high balance, first of all, establish what happened, like Kelly recommended, and then say, since the change in the economy, there's a lot of times that friends and family are more willing to step in and help. On the balance of like $28,000, who could maybe put that on a card or advance you that money and have you pay them back over time? And at least perpetuate thought towards who they might be able to get help from. Again, if it's an auto deficiency, if it is a high balance student loan, maybe a mom, dad, aunt, or uncle or grandparent could help them. I also like recommending the money source of, and you got to put some oomph and some surprise in it, but I'll say something like, Beth, a lot of people don't think about this, but if you or a family member have a whole life insurance policy, those build cash values you can borrow against and probably pay this off and maybe a couple of other bills too. That'd probably help loosen your budget a little bit, wouldn't it? And just get them talking, have a conversation, help them get creative looking for money sources.
Yeah, and don't be scared to have those conversations, because that's what's going to stop you from being successful. I think, as we hire new people who don't have collection experience, one of the things they'll say is, well, if someone said that to me, I would not borrow from my friends and family. Well, the people that you're talking on the phone are not you. So just assume that they're open to any suggestion and open to any idea, and don't be scared to throw it out there as long as it's, respectful and neat and clean.
Well, when you're dealing with those larger student loan balances, or, an unsecured, maybe it's a repossessed car and it's a deficiency balance, those types of balances still accrue pretty high interest rate too. So keep that in mind as well, that, as Roger and Kelly are talking about, don't be afraid to ask those questions. And even if it's something you might personally be uncomfortable with, don't put that off into your talk-offs when you're trying to negotiate with the consumer. These are situations where they may be able to go get a personal loan with their credit union, or like Roger said, with insurance. Maybe they have a 401k or another means that they could get that money from at a lower interest rate, or a payment plan that once they pay you off, that's maybe something more affordable to them too. Or it may be a situation where maybe this is a time where after you get all of your full and complete information, a 10 or 20% down payment. Sometimes it's easier for consumers to borrow a smaller lump sum, $300, $500 down payment, maybe $1,000, and then they can make that monthly payment to you that fits in their budget, which maybe they wouldn't be able to without that chunk of money up front.
We're just about out of time, but there's one last question I'd like to ask and maybe get a quick answer from each of the panelists before we wrap up. And the question is, can you give an example of an exercise you use on how to be a better communicator? Maybe we'll get one exercise from everybody before we wrap up. Roger, would you tackle this one first, please?
I sure will try. Over the years, I've done a lot of goofy things. I like having kind of a screen. If you're doing a class of people, having a screen between two sets of people, one where there's a communicator looking face to face with their partner trying to build a Lego model, and the second where the communicator has a Lego model that's trying to communicate through a screen with their partner, so there's no visual. And it really helps hone in on what words are necessary, as well as when frustration sets in, you can start hearing it in their voice. So I would say anything that is, quite frankly, outside of collections a little bit. Let's teach this as a soft skill, because communication comes in every facet of our life, but teaches them how to deal with adversity in communications rather than just what crystal clean collection or communications looks like.
I'll go next. So one of the things that I would do to help with communication is I do an activity where I pair up everybody. So there's groups of two, and I have them stand in front of each other, not in each other's personal space, but close enough that they can observe their person. And I have them review and kind of take a look at the person they're standing in front of that they're paired off with. I give them about, 10 or 15 seconds to, check them out. And then I have them turn around. And all I simply say to them is, okay, now that you're back to back, I want you to change something about yourself. Change something. And I give them, 5 or 10 seconds to change something about themselves. They turn back around and they face their partner. And then their partner has to figure out what was changed. So if I was partner with Roger, I got to figure out what Roger changed about himself from when he turned around. And the key about this exercise is when I communicated my instructions, all I said was, I want you to change something about yourself. Almost, I would say probably between 85 to 90% of the time, and I've done this exercise a ton, everybody takes something away from themselves. So they take away their earring, they take away their hat, they take away, their necklace, they take away the barrette out of their hair, they take off their belt. And the point is that all I did was say, change something about yourself. But when we hear change or we hear some instructions, to us, we mean that you're taking something away from me. And a lot of times when we're on the phone with the consumers and we're trying to negotiate, and we're trying to, help them to get their balance paid in one format or another, to them, we're taking something away from them. We're taking away that $50 a month that they could use somewhere else. We're taking away that $25 that they could have been able to go, get their nails done or whatever. And so that's how I kind of like to teach communication is what you're saying can be heard so differently than what you intended. And how do we work through that? So that's an activity that I do to help with communication.
Okay, so I'm going to try to say mine quickly. I do a training on building rapport, and so what I do is I give two people, and I take one person away and say, okay, you're going to build rapport with this person, and you're going to do it by matching and mirroring their voice qualities and their body language, and you're going to have a conversation with them. Just a regular old conversation, but as they're talking to you, when you talk back, kind of talk in the same volume as they're talking, in the same speed that they're talking, but match and mirror how they're sitting and how they're leaning back in their chair, all that other good stuff. So then I have that person be done, and then another person comes in, and I'm like, you're going to do the exact opposite. You're going to talk louder than this person. You're going to talk faster than this person. If they're leaning back in their chair, you're going to lean forward. You're going to break rapport. You're not going to match and mirror anything. And then the person that they were communicating with now gets to pick who did they enjoy talking to more. And then they always, 100% of the time, pick the person who matched and mirrored them. So it just kind of shows them how to quickly build a relationship just based on your communication style and changing based on the person you're talking to. So I felt like I explained that really quickly, but if you want more information, let me know.
I thought it
Awesome.
was
Thank you. Yes. Well, before I let everybody go, I want to thank Beth, Kelly, and Roger one more time for their insights and their time today. Really, really appreciate them taking the time out of their day to share their best practices, their ideas, and their experience with us. Also want to thank TCM one last time for sponsoring today's webinar. Please go to www.tcm.com to learn more about the company. Thanks to everybody who participated and asked questions. A recording of this event will be made available in the coming days on accountsrecovery.net. And please stay tuned to accountsrecovery.net for news and more webinars in the very near future. I hope everybody enjoys their day. Roger, Beth, Kelly, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.